What's the next steps for the Save Ardrossan Harbour campaign, and how are you looking for people to get involved?
We did apply to have a petition at the Scottish Parliament. The Scottish Government Public Participation in Petitions Committee rejected our petition because it wasn't of national importance. That was a blood pressure spike moment when that email came through. I don't understand for a minute how it's not a national issue and how our petition was ever rejected, but we're going to keep going. We need to get some meetings arranged with some MSPs. Whoever will talk to us, we'll sit down and get a full understanding of what the next stage means for these negotiations. Ardrossan Harbour obviously is our focus. North Ayrshire as a whole is impacted. There isn't a business in Princess Street or Glasgow Street that folk in the Save Ardrossan Harbour Committee haven't spoke to. Some of them have said they're losing £400 a week. Businesses you wouldn't have thought were linked, and it's not just the economic effect, it's the social and health impact. People in the island can't book a dentist appointment, they can't just jump in the boat and go.
Hello Matt, welcome along to Calicorner, mate. You're here from the Save the Ardrossan Harbour campaign. I really appreciate you coming in today.
No, thanks for inviting us up. I'm glad to be here. Hi, thank you.
Oh, no problem. It's a campaign that's close to my heart. I'm a Freetoons. I was originally from the Freetoons, so it's my hometown, so I've got skin in the game here. So if there's anybody listening for Troon, don't expect impartiality here. This is no the BBC. This is very much set with the objective of what can we do to help, basically.
Yeah.
So probably the first obvious question is, what made you get involved with the campaign, Matt? And then we can kind of take it from there.
Okay, well, I think there's been lots of small conversations happening about what's happening with the boats, because we knew years ago these big boats were coming and what would happen, where they would fit, where they wouldn't. So there'd been lots of small conversations happening. And a friend of mine put a poll up on a wee community page asking, where do you want the boats to go, Ardrossan or Troon? And within a couple of hours it hit 5,000 responses, and I'm not going to lie, some of them did say Troon, some wayward souls out there, but like 97% was for Ardrossan. And then that got a few of us talking, and a friend of mine, Frances, she's going, we need to do something about this. So she got a few of us together, and that kind of snowballed from there. And that must have been about August. So we had a couple of meetings, a couple of chats going, right, what we're going to do about this? How concerned should we be? And the more we chatted, the more we thought, aye, okay, this isn't getting enough attention. And then we thought, right, we need to do this officially. We need to go down the route, forming a committee, get a constitution, do all the things to get properly constituted as a group so that we can be set up the right way, so that we can say, because the point is we wanted to be community driven and make sure we're reflecting what the community are saying they want and what their concerns are. And that slowly led up to our first public meeting, start of October at the Civic Centre, and we had 344 through the door before we had to turn them away. The janitor was very concerned about his number of skulls in the building at once, obviously, which was fair enough, and there was about 80 watching the online feed, and that really brought it home that this is a major issue, that we've all been very quietly between friends, family, colleagues, folk having wee conversations, but there was no big conversation happening with the town all kind of coming together around it.
No, that's good. And what about, have you done anything like this before? Have you been involved with any sort of campaigning, any projects at this scale or size?
No, I haven't. Some folk in our committee have. Some of them were involved in the original A to B campaign when Troon wanted to win the contract for the ferry. I think that was 2017, 16, 17 roughly.
Around about then.
So there's a few in the committee that have been involved that time round. And can't quite believe there they are in 2024, 2025, feeling that they're having the same fight again. But that one, the A to B campaign, was very different because that was driven by North Ayrshire Council. They led that campaign, so they had more connections, more resources than just a bunch of folk in Ardrossan going, right, what are we doing about this? we managed to rent the hall because one of the guys for the local business that was supporting us, he covered the cost of that. So initially it was just, who's going to help, how we're going to pull this off, compared to the council-run campaign, A to B.
No, that's interesting. What about, when I googled you though, Matt, it says that you work for like a Labour MP. Is it worth putting that out there, like, so that folk know this is not non-party political? This is
absolutely, and it's something that was discussed at committee when we got a group. I worked for Arran Campbell, MP, Labour MP for North Ayrshire and Arran constituency, and it was discussed when I got involved in but it's never been a political campaign. and I've been very clear in that. And me personally, I've been particularly aware of making sure there's a kind of neutral divide. I'm not leaning, and there's no point, because there isn't a political division on this issue. And what we've done is try to make sure we're talking to everyone. We've written letters and emails. Well, emails, not letters, because I'm the secretary of the campaign and my handwriting's atrocious. So thank God for email. I couldn't have done this in the old days. But we've regularly written to all 33 North Ayrshire councillors. And you've got Labour, it's SNP-led, Labour, Tory, a couple of independents and Reform councillors now. We've written to all of them, and they're all supportive of the campaign, and they all want it to be Ardrossan. Same for the 8 West of Scotland MSPs that we spoke to. Kenneth Gibson for SNP, Katie Clark for Labour, and Jamie Green for the Tories have been the most vocal on the issue. But the other 5 West Scotland MSPs have all been supportive. There isn't a political divide on this, but we have made sure we're talking to everyone and that we're not pushing a particular political agenda.
No, I think it's important to float that, because I don't think the people in the Free Towns, when I speak to people, for anybody back home or anybody from Ardrossan, cares about the sort of party politics of this. There's just a genuine anxiety that something that's been there for nearly 200 years is potentially not going to, sail for Ardrossan anymore, which would be devastating, obviously. So
yeah, hugely. And I actually think it would have been slightly easier if there was a political division, because then you can try and talk to one party over the next. But if everyone's saying the same thing, where's the push coming from? And that's what it seemed to be, because if everyone's saying the same thing, everyone's going, we want it to be Ardrossan, and that's from the Scottish Government, CMAL, Peel, all the stakeholders involved, as well as all the elected officials. Everyone was saying the same thing. So then it just gets to the disbelief going, well, if everyone's for this, why are we not there yet?
Well, that's the question.
Yeah.
So you've asked it there. So what are some of the reasons then? Like, why have you had to set up like a sort of local community-led thing that sits out with, the people who are effectively elected to, make these decisions and bring these, capital investment projects to fruition?
Yeah. Well, it's some of the big concerns have been lack of communication. I mean, I'm sure you've seen it yourself, how many times we've been told the business case is imminent, the business case is substantially ready. It was said in 2024 it was ready. What stopped them releasing it was general election was called, so that stops government business being announced. Obviously, election came and went, and there was no business case. And you're going back to 2015 when the contracts with Ferguson Marine Shipyard were signed to build the boats to be ready in 2018. And there's no point delving into all the delays of the boats. We're going to talk about that to some degree. But they were meant to be ready in 2018. 2015, they knew they were too big for Ardrossan. And 10 years later, we're absolutely nowhere. That's one of the reasons why there had to be a community group to create more noise, and that was one of the things we kept telling ourselves. We didn't know how far we would get. We didn't know if anyone would listen. And the biggest priority at the start was make some noise and let folk know there's folk in Ardrossan that aren't happy, and it's got wider than that. We spoke to folk from Troon to Largs, and obviously we've got close ties with folk in Arran as well. So it's not just an Ardrossan thing, it's Ardrossan Harbour obviously is our focus. And we deliberately picked the harbour rather than the ferry, because the ferries are sailing, there's a ferry there, but it's much more the harbour and the connections in Ardrossan, and in fact the wider North Ayrshire as a whole that's impacted.
Aye, no, absolutely. And obviously you're living in the community at the moment yourself, so you're, seeing people in the street, in the supermarket, in the pubs, wherever, these, public meetings. Like, how would you describe, what the feeling is in the local area?
I think people are quite annoyed by it all, and quite concerned, because there isn't a business in Princess Street or Glasgow Street that folk in the Save Ardrossan Harbour Committee haven't spoke to. Some of them have said they're losing £400 a week. A laundrette used to go the CalMac uniforms. And it's things like that. It's businesses you wouldn't have thought were linked. I've heard, I've not confirmed this one, but I did hear Drewson's in Ardrossan was quieter because Drewson's and Pressure was doing the Arran runs, because it's obviously less than transport costs. Arran Haulage are obviously based right at Ardrossan Harbour. They're there for a reason, and obviously now they're going to Troon. And it's not just the economic effect, it's the social and health impact. People in the island can't just book a dentist appointment. Most of them come to the dentist in the 3 towns. They can't just get an appointment, jump in the boat and go. They've got to work it out. They've got to plan. If you're going as a foot passenger, Troon adds such extra time to the journey. It's much more awkward. We did it ourselves. We were over in Arran on the 8th of February. We did a wee rally with our Arran counterparts, Arran for Ardrossan Harbour, and we work very closely with them. We're pretty much linked. And we were 10 hours that day, and 5 of that was travelling. We were only on Arran for 5 hours, but to go from my house in Ardrossan to Arran took 2.5 hours instead of 55 minutes sailing for Ardrossan.
Aye, well, there's no a train service right next to the port at Troon. You know, it's about a mile of distance, whereas obviously Ardrossan sort of town and Ardrossan Harbour's right there. You're talking, you know, significant sort of distance there, and I think that's been highlighted from the Visit Arran sort of CEO who got back to me when I had asked about this. You know, like people who've got mobility issues specifically are the ones who are like most impacted by this, it seems. So
Was that Sheila?
It was, aye.
She's great. She spoke at our meeting in Brodick, and she's been very vocal at raising the issues, which has been fantastic.
Aye, and I was asking about like the local impact. Like people will know, like the Ardrossan, Saltcoats and Stevenson, it's pretty much the same place. It's called the 3 towns. It's very interconnected, but also the islanders on Arran are looking for this to go to and from Ardrossan for some of the reasons you outlined there as well. Absolutely.
Like you say, there's no real connectivity from Troon. If you're coming from Brodick, Lamlash, Blackwater, anywhere, and you're going to a doctor's appointment at Crosshouse Hospital, so you're leaving North Ayrshire to arrive in South Ayrshire to travel to your hospital in East Ayrshire, and that's just nuts. And there's no direct link. I can't even think. We've talked about this all day. I can't remember what buses you would take and how long it would take to go from Arran to Crosshouse via Troon.
I think there's only like an hourly service or something at Troon, so if there's a delay for, you know, all sorts of manner of reasons, right, we don't need to go into specifics of that, then it seriously inhibits your ability to obviously, you know, get to appointments on time, I suppose.
We've heard folk from Arran booking hotels in the mainland, so that they know they're coming over early enough so that they're definitely making their appointment. And if you're going to a hospital clinic, that can be stressful enough without the extra cost and time involved. So it's just not suitable at all.
Yeah, that's it. There's definitely a cost element to this, right? And I think this is one of the points I wanted to make. So the press are obsessed with the business case, like the economics of this.
Yeah.
But this goes deeper than that for me. Like you're a local. It feels like, well, we do own the ferries. It feels like it's our ferry, effectively. And when I think back to like my childhood memories, even as like an adult, my son's named after the Isle of Arran. He's called Arran quite deliberately. And my dad would be standing at the back window saying, "There's the ferry coming in, there's the ferry coming out," when he's a baby.
Yeah.
You know, you can't even understand what he's saying. But this is like, it's a bit of escapism for the people who live locally in that community to speculate, you know, who's on that ferry, where are they coming from, have they had a good time, what are they going to do? And then even the younger generation, they're probably looking at the ferry and how many people locally, you know, work for CalMac, going to work in this industry, either want to, you know, sail the ship, or they want to work as an engineer and fix the ship, or just work on the ships. And we're potentially going to deprive people of that opportunity. Can you put a cost on that?
No, not at all. And the day we went to Troon, we were talking to all the CalMac guys as we were passing them, and one guy that was working at the dock in Troon said quite clearly, he's going, "We need this back in Ardrossan." He's going, "I work in Ardrossan." And the extra time and commute it's costing him going to his work now, when Ardrossan's always been the base. We do keep telling ourselves, we're told this is temporary, but that's the big thing. The sailings for Troon are temporary, but what does temporary mean? That's what we don't know.
There is anxiety, like we have to float this. There's no doubt about it. When I put a hang up to sort of say we were doing this, people in the area think that there's some sort of deal being done already. They think for some reason that because Troon is more affluent and it's got the links already there with the golf and they've already got the expensive fishes, that somehow somebody somewhere has managed to secure. Is that something that you as a campaigner are worried about, or is the business, the case is now unarguable, it's now undisputable that Ardrossan is going to get the ferry? It's just a question of when and how long it's going to take.
Well, they've told us that Ardrossan's going to get the ferry gone back to 2015. or 2016, and they've repeatedly stated that. But I think there is lots of claims. I've heard folks saying there's planning permission for flats to be built at Ardrossan Harbour, and part of this goes back to one of our main concerns is the lack of transparency, the lack of engagement with the community, the lack of information coming down, and there's this void out there where folk don't know what's happening. So stories create, and there might be a grain of truth, or someone's heard something, and it's all just grows. You know what it's like. Although interestingly, we have heard from some businesses in Troon that they've seen a reduction in footfall because some folk are driving, parking in Troon, walking to the boat, and then folk that live in Troon are having difficulty getting parked in the high street. So it's affecting Troon as well, not necessarily positively.
Aye, but we'll get to all that. Like, I think for this, like a lot of people who are listening right are probably sort of from the area, but this has become, in my opinion, a national issue.
Yep.
This ferry route was the busiest route in Scotland. You're talking about over 750,000 people, I think, visited Arran, in the previous years, and they've got plans to grow that to over 1 million. We're only a country of 5.5 million, so it's quite a significant number of people going to what is a small sort of island population.
Yeah.
So I think what would be useful, Matt, is to do like a bit of a timeline, and then we can just have at it. I'll open up to you as the secretary of the committee to sort of say, what do you see as like the issues? I know you've mentioned things like communication and transparency, but we need to go back to sort of 2014 and beyond to set the scene here, I think, and then we can go to where we're at now and what can be done to help.
Okay, so timeline of the whole process, basically?
Aye, everything, like as you see it.
No, 2015, I believe was when the contracts were signed at the shipyard for the boats. From what I've read and what I've heard, there was lots of changes, very complex machinery with the LNG gas, and that caused extra complexities in the build and the cost. And I don't think the shipyard had built ships to this size or scale before. And yeah, you have to say, because there is an element of there's just folk that work there, same as there's just folk that work in the ship, and they're not responsible for any of the decisions. And some folk are quite sensitive that you're not blaming just because they work for them. You're not blaming every worker because they're not making the decisions. It's higher up than that. But there was obviously a lot of issues with the shipyard. They went bust. They get brought into public ownership, and we've gone from what we're at now, over 400 million has ballooned to the cost for these ships. And the Glen Rosa, we don't know when that's coming. That was scheduled for September this year, and that was obviously several delays because it was 2018 these boats were meant to be ready. From what I've read, they used a lot of the parts in the Glen Rosa to make sure they get the Glen Sannox out and running. So we've no idea. We're over 400 million for a boat and a half, which is nuts. So 2018, that was meant to be done. Just before that, there was the ATB campaign where Troon wanted it. So not surprisingly, Troon popped up to say, "Oh, we'll be your saviours and temporarily use our port." But ATB ran successfully for Ardrossan, and I believe it was Hamza Yousaf was the Transport Secretary at the time. One of 7 we've had over the last 8 years in this matter. And he categorically stated Ardrossan had won and Ardrossan was going to be the destination for the boat. Where did we go for there? Is that when the task force come into being?
Yeah, I think the task force is definitely worth highlighting in my opinion, so go for it.
So, Transport Secretary, so that's currently Fiona Hislop. I don't believe she wasn't there when this was set up. She was, like I say, it's been a conveyor belt. And I don't know if that, I do know, I'm going to say clearly that's been part of the problem. The amount of Transport Secretaries overseeing this. You've got the Transport Secretary that chairs the task force.
Let's talk, let's park it for a second there, right? A task force, like if anybody wants to Google like what a task force is supposed to do, they're set up with a strategic objective, achieving an outcome. It's called, the Ardrossan Harbour Task Force. So you're talking about in 2017, I think is when the plans were approved to say, we want to upgrade the harbour here. Costing had been signed off, everything else by Hamza Yousaf, who was Transport Secretary, went on to bigger and greater things to become the First Minister. And then in 2023, I think it was, they sort of realised that the plans were inadequate, or the costs had went up, whatever it was, a combination of the two. So they sort of 2022. I'll need to check my notes, but they decided we're going to have to, redo the plan effectively, which there'll be a cost associated with that as well. And then we've been told a few months ago that the plan was sort of nearly complete, it was nearly ready. And here we are, it's 2025, and there's still no sign of a digger or a worker in Ardrossan to upgrade anything. So, there's questions to be asked about the effectiveness of this task force, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. So you've got the leader of North Ayrshire Council in the task force. Kenneth Gibson is the constituency MSP. CMAL, Peelport's Isle of Arran Ferry Committee, I believe, started life as a community group. They weren't involved initially, but I think they joined later on. I'll need to double check that. But
I think when you check, all these minutes are available online, so people can go and see what they've talked about and how things have progressed. They're there for 2017 on the minutes. Arran Ferry
so
Committee.
Been there since the start. Then that was.
I think they missed the first meeting, but the second minutes that are online, they're on there.
Yeah. So, like I say, that task force has been running. They've had a clear objective. And it's not clear at all what happened. And the last meeting was May 2024 that I could see. I've spoke to other folk that have suggested that perhaps wasn't an official task force meeting, whatever that means, I don't know. But that's the last where there's any sort of record of them meeting. And again, the minutes come out, but the minutes say very little. If you go through it, there's no real direction, or it's not actions, or this is going to happen next, this is going to happen next, and that it all comes back to the lack of engagement and the lack of communication and the lack of transparency with the communities affected by this. We did request to join the task force. We wrote to everyone involved. CalMac got back to us, said they were supportive, but ultimately rests with the Transport Secretary, and they would pass our email on, and we emailed every day in the task force. She wrote to us last week to say we weren't getting on the task force. We weren't required because Ardrossan has already been represented by its elected officials, being Kenneth Gibson and Marie Burns, leader of North Ayrshire Council. I would say to that, they are the elected representatives, and they also represent Ardrossan and Arran, but Arran also have a community group on the task force. There's no independent group for the mainland got a voice in that task force, and we asked and we were turned down.
That's interesting. Marie Burns, is she Labour or is she SNP as well?
It's SNP that run North Ayrshire Council, they've got the majority.
Right, okay, but there's been maybe Labour people there in the past?
Yes, there would have been.
So it's kind, because they've got skin in the game here effectively as well, so this is one of the things that I wanted to float, right, because it seems like what they've been quoting with regards to some of the challenges is sort of EU, competition and regulation laws, and then UK laws, with regards to the costing. So obviously, I think, to be fair, there does seem to be, as you've outlined yourself, consensus, amongst all the different groups that they want the ferry to go for Ardrossan. But the port is privately owned by Peelport Group, right? So they own the asset of the harbour, and it seems like everybody is publicly sort of saying that they have been dragging their heels. They've just been holding on to their investment, seeing all these reports getting produced. They know that strategically how important it is, but they don't want to put any money in their pocket themselves to sort of upgrade that. Has there been a bit of a cop-out maybe with some of these laws that are getting quoted with regards to, we can only put in so much of the money, or, is there other things at play?
I think there's lots of different things at play. Peelport's possibly don't have the greatest reputation in the area as being a private owned. They're called out repeatedly by different groups to say it's their harbour, what they're doing for it, what are they putting in. We met with Jim McSporn, the ports director of Peelports. He met with the committee, and he'd said, as far as he was concerned, they were very much for Ardrossan, and he said the money, their Peelports money was still on the table to do the development.
Did he say how much money?
No. Just said that they were still ready to do it, and as far as he was concerned, they're getting most of their asset. If there's two boats running from it all day long, and they're not at that stage, they were down to one boat sailing. Now there's no boats, but he was down to half income, as the way he explained it to us.
Did he go into the specifics of how much Peelports have made off of the Ardrossan Harbour in the last sort of 10 years, and how much specifically they've made in berthing fees from CalMac?
No. He didn't. He did talk about some of the things they've spent on the harbour, repairing fenders, things like that. And he did explain the Irish berth, because that's a big thing folk talk about, why it was stopped getting used. Now, according to what Jim McGowan told us, is that was never part of the agreement for CalMac to be using the berth at all. They used it in bad weather, and it was kind of in good faith gesture. It wasn't part of the original deal. So they were fine for it being used occasionally, but the Alfred used it for about a year and a half, and then they said it was too damaged to continue. Now, obviously, that's their statement, and other folk will have different views on it. And we've had a bit of grief from some people saying we've been in cohorts with Peelports as a group, and that's not the case at all. He was one of the few stakeholders that engaged with us. So he was going to sit down. We'll sit down with anyone. And we've asked to meet with Seema, we've asked to meet with CalMac, we've asked to meet with Fiona Hislop. Not had much response in that.
No, that's interesting, because again, we're aligned on this, right? We've got the same objective. We want the harbour to be upgraded at Ardrossan, the ferries to go to and from Ardrossan. Simple as that. I contacted Peelports only this week, to be fair, but and there's obviously a lot happened this week, but I never got any response from the sort of compliance officer or from Jim McGowan, and I'm just a random member of the public, but I did get responses for, Visit Arran, Kenneth Gibson, people like that, so it's worth sort of pointing that out there. And again, with regards, do you know what the costs are? Like, do you know roughly what they've made over the last 10 years? No. So the quotes that I've been given is that they've made over 10 million in that period, just from CalMac alone.
Yeah.
And according to Neil, the Herald there, he's saying that, Ardrossan Harbour's sort of generating 2 million operationally, sort of annually.
Yeah.
And it's important to mention that, because the developments this week, obviously, if the now goal is to nationalise Ardrossan Harbour and buy it, then how much that port can generate, operationally year on year, and income is going to determine how much it's worth effectively.
Yes.
So if the ferry, as we've known since 2017, if the new ferries are too big to dock there and go from there, then their ability to make money is severely hindered. So they've got to take that. They're in a strong negotiating position, in my opinion, Peelports, because of the delays, the unacceptable delays. Let's just call it what it is. This should have been upgraded. The money this should have been decided a long time ago.
Absolutely.
And if it became evident that Peel were not going to put in, they didn't have enough money, or they weren't prepared to put in enough money to accommodate that, then the decision to nationalise should have been made long before now.
Yeah. Peel didn't decide what boats. Scottish Government ordered these boats that don't fit Ardrossan. And as soon as they decided these were the boats that were going, let's say, there should have been action taken. And as far as I'm aware, there's 3 folk involved in the funding for developments of the harbour. Transport Scotland, North Ayrshire Council and Peelports are all on the line for varying amounts, and I believe that's been one of the stumbling blocks in the business case, is down to who pays what. And I don't know the percentages of who's destined to pay what, and that's obviously a big thing. North Ayrshire Council were heading into this new budget year with an estimated £60 million shortfall. So you assume that must impact on what they've got sitting available. And I think the main players, it's going to come down to how much government need to pay, how much people need to pay. But obviously we're not privy to the contracts agreed to work out what that is. But this was the 9th, the much delayed business case. This was the 9th version we were waiting on. I'm led to believe there had been 8 done with varying amounts of the cost, from 30 million to 130 odd million. Last I heard, the figure was for the development works was about 97 million. But now the government need to buy the port, so they need to negotiate. They've had all these years and they can't negotiate with Peelports. That's obviously broken down, but they can't get a deal for the business case. So now we have to enter new negotiations with Peelports. And our concern is, if the negotiations break down like they already have, where does that leave us?
And a sticky wicket is the short answer. Like, this is obviously critical now. Like, where does this sit on the national agenda? Like, obviously it's number one on your agenda, but where do you think this fits, nationally? We compare it to Grangemouth and, other transport projects that are underway in Scotland. I
think it's a national issue, of course it is. It's part of the national infrastructure, and there's been island communities up north that have suffered because we've taken a boat off them to keep a service going at Arran. The CalMac fleet as a whole is all aging and needs replaced. They've got the 4 smaller boats that are getting built in Turkey and the new ferries, and they've had delays as well, because one was meant to be ready last winter and one was meant to be ready spring. They're not ready. And the Isle of Arran's gone away to serve, obviously, the other islands. They don't have enough flexibility in the fleet to maintain perfect cover across all the islands, on all the island communities. And one harbour getting tied up, and the money that's costing, because they're renting the Alfred. Figures from anywhere up to $1 million a month are quoted in renting the Alfred, and that's been there a good few years now. So that's impacting on what they can spend to replace other aging fleets. It seems as a whole, not much has been done to make sure the fleet was fit for service. And as all the boats have aged at the same time, you get the CalMac, it was built in the mid-80s, I think 84, and that was built about 4 years after the Isle of Arran was built. The MV Isle of Arran, as soon as they built that, they realised it was too small. So then they built the CalMac for a bigger capacity, and that was 84. The CalMac can carry more foot passengers than the Sanacs. I don't understand.
Do you know what the numbers are there?
I had them here. That's why I was playing on my phone earlier.
Aye, no, I'll let you get them up. No worries there. I think like that's the key here, is it? It's a difficult job they've got. Right, there's nobody saying that this is easy or straightforward.
Yeah.
But some of the decisions they're taking, like you're saying, where they're borrowing and they're renting, they're robbing Peter to pay Paul. Yeah. Like it's sort of exasperating the situation. So really, this decision to purchase Peel, and we've been told the talks are progressing at pace. Mm-hmm. Like there's got to be a deadline set, really, and to that, in my opinion. And if so, like, what kind of timeline would you like to see before those talks are, publicly concluded and then legally concluded, so that the works can start to take place in Ardrossan? Because, as Neil pointed out to me, once and hopefully, and if the work does go ahead at Ardrossan, for the time period where that's starting to it finishes, you're not going to have any ferries going there. So you're still, all those businesses you're talking about, the laundrette who can't service, washing of the uniforms, they're still out there £400 a week for 2 years. So that's whatever, 8,000 to 10,000, that's probably what they pay to rent the shop or lease the shop. Yeah,
absolutely. There needs to be very quickly, this announcement has to be followed by action. I mean, you said in there, it was Fiona Hislop you were quoting, saying conversations happening, negotiations are happening at pace. As soon as I heard the announcement, I emailed Jim McSporran. He got back to me on Thursday morning and he said, these discussions are at an early stage. An approach has been made with Transport Scotland CMA to discuss the possibility of an Ardrossan acquisition. So that's slightly different language from Fiona Hislop and just muddies the waters a bit more, because what is negotiations at pace to very early stage?
Aye, but like I appreciate Jim's obviously giving you some information there, but they're not wanting to reveal their hand either.
Of course not.
They've got what their price is, right? And that price is going to be heavily inflated. And the Scottish Government have surely got a price in mind, which they're willing to pay. Have you heard any speculation roughly about what that would be?
No, I haven't. And that is going to be the big concern. And obviously, like you say, Peel Ports have got their own agenda and they're going to protect their negotiating pace, as the Scottish Government will. But we do need very quickly actual timelines when this will be concluded, because like you say, when's the work happening? People need time to plan. When the Sanacs was announced that it was launching on the 13th of January, that was announced around the 28th, 29th of December, and that was the announcement there that there would be no boats from Ardrossan. So from the 28th of December to the 13th of January, that's how much notice the community's got, that's how much notice businesses got to prepare for no boats coming out of Ardrossan in the quietest part of their year financially. People need time to plan. They need to know we're buying the harbour, prices have been agreed, contracts will be signed, ideally this summer. And if that happens, so they sign contracts this summer, then they need to get some assessments done in the harbour. I don't know what stage we're at. I did hear that they haven't put divers in the water yet, so they don't have a full scope of what needs done as far as enlarging the berths. They've not been dredged in a while, I know that much. So how much that involves.
I think they had to put divers in the water. Well, Peel did when
Right.
when they assessed the state of the Irish berth.
Okay, yeah.
So whether that was, widened out any, who knows, but they certainly had to have divers in the water to make the assessment that that was now unsafe
Yeah.
for the catamaran to dock there. And apparently, that I was told by Neil at the Herald that when they made that decision to close the Irish berth, they issued a press release. So they didn't even tell CalMac or Transport Scotland. They heard through the press.
Yes.
So I think that sort of indicates, what the state of the relationship is there. So
Yes.
if there has been a kind of breakdown in that relationship, then again, as Jim at Peelports are the backers of Peelports, the private, the owner who owns 51% and Deutsche Asset Management who owns 49%, are they going to be looking to do any sort of, favours and deals here? Don't think so. They're looking to protect their asset because whatever Ardrossan Harbour sells for is going to indicate, how much the rest of their assets are worth there. So when I put it into artificial intelligence, which I told you, right, just various sort of chat tools, it was sort of saying that the harbour was worth sort of 5 to 50 million. Obviously, it's just AI that's looking at a comparison to how much is Troon worth, how much operational is it taking in. And anticipate it'll probably go for more than that just because of how strategically important it is. But again, there has to be some sort of deadline. I think there's been budget set aside, so there's like 500 million in this budget for buying the harbour. So let's see. But I think, as has been mentioned, the negotiations need to be conducted at pace, and if there's any blockers or any issues or any other avenues going to be taken to buy the port, I think that has to be put into the public domain very quickly. Like you say, the communication's not been good enough.
Absolutely. Folk need to understand what stage it's going at, because people will talk and they're going to talk with more uncertainty. You leave a void, it gets filled, and it gets filled with misinformation, and that can just cause division and upset, and there's no need for it. They need to be as clear as they can. And what's the role of the task force now? Are they disbanding? Because now we're straight negotiations between the government and Peel for a buyout. So I don't know what role the task force have now, if any. So more explanation around how it all plays out. Because if it is going to be shut, and someone I spoke to, and I hope they're wildly wrong, said it could be up to 4 years for the work to be done. But what work is getting done? And particularly now, the focus has to be more than ever on value for the public purse, because the public purse is footing the bill for everything, buying the port and 100% of the redevelopment now, if the buyout goes ahead. And I don't know if you saw the big artist drawing and the big fancy landscape images that were done for the redevelopment of Ardrossan Harbour. And it'll be a big fancy new terminal building. From our conversation in the community, nobody cares. Nobody wants big terminal buildings. Fix the berth. Do what needs done to fix the berth. And if we're buying the port, we can fix the Irish berth as well. And that gives even more resilience for Ardrossan to be a port all year round. Make the Irish berth, because I'm told it's a floating pontoon. It's not a hard and fast berth as you're used to. So it's been designed and built slightly different. And it's apparently unsafe. What that means, well, there's something wrong with the legs is what I've been led to believe, but I don't know the ins and outs of all that. But if they're buying it, they can fix the Irish berth as well. Fix the Irish berth, fix the Arran berth, and leave everything else as is. We don't need a new terminal building. That one's fine. You can get in, you can get a seat, you can even get a wee coffee before you get on the boat. We don't need it. And if you talk to folk in Arran about the terminal building they have, nobody likes that. This 2-floor airport walkway, which if you're elderly or infirm, you've got to walk further than ever. So we certainly don't want something like that built in Ardrossan, and that's just going to cost more time and money. Do the bare minimum to get the boats sailing, and that's what should have been done years ago. And like you say, they could have argued over who owns what. Scottish Government, this Scottish SNP have been in power 14 years, something like that. They've had plenty of time. If they wanted to get Peel out the way, they could have. They could have bought this at any point. And last year when folk were talking about it, and I don't care who owns the port, we just want the boat sailing. And I would have said last year, do everything you can to fix the berth and get a boat sailing now, and then argue later about who owns the port. But obviously that's changed with the announcement this week, and that's all focus, like you say, is going to be on these negotiations now. But value at the public purse, do the bare minimum required to let the Glen Sannox and the Glen Rosa berth at Ardrossan, which is what they were designed and built for.
No, I agree with a lot of that. You need a willing seller though. Obviously, we've not been privy to these negotiations, so it'd be good, obviously, you've got a contact with Jim, if you could say, this is the percentage that we were willing to go to versus, what the Scottish Government were. But it is bizarre, I suppose, is the word I would use, that you have asked, to be put on the task force. They're saying no, but yet you've got, it looks as though, a working relationship with Peel. So I would have thought that could have been used potentially, to the advantage of the public purse.
Yeah. Well, I have wrote to Kenneth Gibson. I've not heard back from him yet, but I did write to him, I think, just Thursday there, to ask if he would meet with the task force and talk us through what he thinks might unfold in rough timescales or anything. And we'll write to Fiona Hislop as well and ask her, and I'll write to Jim McSporran again. I'll write CalMac's email. I'll write to them all and see who can help guide us in the timescale, because it all goes back to folk needing a plan. But it's only been sailing for Troon since the 13th of January, so we're 5-6 weeks into this, and folk are seeing a massive effect already. I mean, the one saving grace is 28th of March, the Calais Isles is meant to be repaired, and I have heard that they're happy with how it's progressing, because that was obviously a concern, because it's been in dry docks for most of 2024. It didn't sail, it's been broke. But I've heard unofficially that they're quite happy with how repairs are progressing and it's on track. You can book it now. You can go on the app and book to sail in the Calais Isles for the summer. And that's going to be very interesting, because then you're going to have a whole summer season, and we will be requesting these figures for CalMac to see how many sailed in the Sannox for Troon and how many sailed for Calais Isles in Ardrossan. And you're going to get a clear contrast between the two this summer, which will be very interesting.
And you mean like foot passengers? Are you talking about cars as well?
Everything. We'll be able to get a breakdown per ship, and that will show clearly where the demand or preference is. I mean, I know there's plenty of folk that have said they love going to Arran, but they're a foot passenger, so they're not going to put themselves through the hassle of going to Troon. For some car journeys, if you're just going by car all the time, it's not as big an inconvenience. They do say the Sannox can fit a lot more cars, and that's pretty much true. But if it's full of trucks, they can't lower the mez decks. So if there's a lot of haulage vehicles going over, the mez decks won't be in use. So that can, but that's the same in any boat. They can fluctuate based on the
weight.
Yeah, and how the size and shape of vehicles that turn up and get booked on.
Well, like me personally, I will not go to Troon. Like if I'm at my mum's, like sometimes if it's a nice day, it's going to be a nice day, you kind of wake up and assess the weather and go, I'll get the first boat over to Arran today, and you're going to have a wee day in Arran. I just will not make the effort of going for Saltcoats to go in into Troon and then to go over on the boat. And I don't think I'll be the only person who'll do that. If there's any issues with these new ferries going for the free tunes, I think you'll find a lot, and there'll be a significant number of people going for it. A lot of people just won't go anymore, and that'll be to the detriment of the island as well.
Absolutely.
And they've unfortunately know the people who've been making the decisions.
And we did for that event we had in Brodick, we all went over as foot passengers, and obviously there was difficulties there. If you sail on the Glen Sannox, they'll bus you for Ardrossan Terminal to Troon Terminal. If you sail on the Alfred, you need to make your own way there. And we had some folk come out that were recording us that day, but they didn't talk to us before they left. They didn't know that, because they wanted to get the earlier boat back, so they left Ardrossan in the bus with us and thought, we don't want to wait till 5 o'clock for the Glen Sannox sailing, we'll just jump in the Alfred. Then they were stuck in Troon and their car was in Ardrossan, because they hadn't thought to look into it, because they didn't think it would be an issue. They thought if there's a bus running for one, it doesn't seem to be the case, as far as my understanding is, because the Sannox was always intended for Ardrossan. That's why they're putting the bus on. But that's having difficulties as well. The Ardrossan Herald did their story yesterday online, highlighting a young woman getting dropped off in the evening at Ardrossan Terminal. It's empty, it's abandoned, there's no lights. So she's walking about in the dark, heading back to wherever she's parked her car, because they've shut the car park at the Ardrossan Terminal. Or if she's not a driver, then she's walking back through that wee tunnel in the darkness. And it's the same in Troon. One of my colleagues that's on the committee, her and her daughter have got family in Arran, and they're regularly travelling over, and they were walking in the pitch black up Troon Harbour to get back to their car. She sent me the pictures, and you can't see a thing. It's not safe, it's not set up. And I thought that was another sign that Troon wasn't ready at all until I saw the article saying they're having the same issue at Ardrossan when folk getting dropped off late at night. It's CalMac office have shut. They've got skeleton staff in there, obviously, because there's no boat sailing. And they're shut for 6. But the bus comes in for Troon later than that, so the place is in darkness.
Aye. No, that's good to highlight that, because it does sound like a definite safety concern. It's barren down there as well, that land.
Aye.
So there wouldn't be a lot of people. Like it would be, I'd be nervous as well if that was me. What about, like, what's your confidence levels then, Matt? Like, that we're going to manage to have a good campaign, and that the new ferries are going to sail to and from Ardrossan?
I mean, it ebbs and flows. At times I think this is definitely happening and it'll be a short-term thing, and it's not going to be a short-term thing. I came to that realisation maybe a month and a half into the campaign, but I'm hopeful we're getting the boats back to Ardrossan. I don't know is the answer, is where I'm sitting right now. I've gone from thinking it's done, it's shut. It's in the 13th of January and that was it. We saw the Isle of Arran leave. A couple of days later, to not come back. And that's something CalMac need to do. They need to stop naming boats after the place they're going when they move them about so much. But that's just my own personal thing. That was quite sad. That was quite. And I've been down to the harbour since, and you're just standing there and there's nothing happening. They've deserted that big car park, empty and abandoned. So I'm not feeling 100% positive. I'd maybe go about 60% that I'm leaning that we'll get the result we want. But I mean, the bigger question is, when's it going to happen, and who's still going to be around for it happening? Our business is still going to be here. Ardrossan has not got a great reputation. You'll know that yourself. It's an area of deprivation. In the last 5 years, there's been good signs. There's been a new bookshop, a new bistro, a second bistro's opened. So folk are investing in the town. Whether they would, the guy at Rendezvous said maybe he wouldn't have if the boat wasn't there. And so that's obviously a concern. If there's a prolonged period of nothing happening, what businesses are still going to be there? And you hope they all will, but it's a difficult economic climate for everyone right now, and this is just an added stress to it.
I wouldn't share this concern, but Neil did highlight for the local paper that even Asda are concerned, because you do get people on the island who travel from Arran over to Ardrossan.
Yep.
The ferries here and the supermarkets there. They drive over, they get their week's worth of shopping, and then they head back. So there will be like a loss of business there. I'm not so much concerned about that, but what I'd be worried about is those people who do that and then they go into the candy bar, or they then go into Cicchini's, or they go to some other local business. I think there's definitely going to be a loss of service and a loss of income there.
That's it. And there's been some folks said, who spends the money in Ardrossan anyway? Because it was just somebody on Facebook, and they said if they travel there, they just go straight to the terminal. But we're finding that's definitely not the case, and there is a much wider spread. I mean, a few years back, there was rumours Travelodge were going to move into Ardrossan before COVID, and there's been no further talk of that since. And why would there be when you don't know if there's a boat? But there has been some signs of growth in the town, and new businesses opening up, which is fantastic to see. But now we're in this big period, and talking about Asda is interesting, because I don't think for a minute they would have picked that site if they thought there was
no boat.
Yeah,
possibly.
I don't know for certain, and you need to talk to Asda. You can't talk to the local manager because you've got to talk to their press office, because obviously they're a huge international conglomerate. No,
of course. The land would be more valuable depending on what happens with Port there, and that's one of the things that I would like to see. Like if we should have bought it, and the conversation about buying it should have happened a long time ago. I've heard it was October last year when these conversations started. If that's when it started, that's disgraceful. Like, they knew in 2017. In 2017, they've known that the boats were going to be too big to be at Ardrossan. So the conversation should have been happening back then. Listen, if we wanted to buy this off you, how much is it worth? And then looking at the sort of consequences in that. And then also the port, if it is purchased, that could be used for other commercial uses. You could have cruise ships, maybe small cruise ships there. You could have freight in there. Scotland's ability to deal with freight, the volumes are much lower than countries that are comparable in size to us. Ireland, we're closer to the likes of Newcastle and the Lake District and what the big ports are doing in England. So if that is purchased, there's definitely opportunities there to use that for business purposes.
You used to be able to sail to Ireland from That's why it's the Irish berth. They used to sail for Ireland. There used to be regular sailings to Isle of Man. The Isle of Man Steam Packet Company had a boat up last year because they were checking to see if they could rent that as a potential alternative. But the ramp did fit, but it was tight. The margins were too tight, so that it would have been too awkward for them, so they couldn't. But you could get Isle of Man ships sailing again. The Waverley's coming back to Ardrossan this year, which is great. That was there last year for the first time in quite a number of years, and it's coming back this year. That's able to dock, thankfully. But yeah, there is scope. If this is going to be a publicly owned port, then great, get on with it, and let's make it a success, because they're going to be however much they can get in a deal to buy it, and then however much it's going to cost to fix it. So it's got to pay its way. They can hopefully recoup, but it's what timescale, how long are they going to operate Ardrossan before it's kind of covered its cost? It has to be a functioning business asset. Peel Ports are a huge company, and obviously Ardrossan's not the be-all and end-all for them. They've got much bigger interests elsewhere. Ardrossan always did seem to be a very small aspect to their enterprise. But it'll be very interesting how quickly we can get moving, because once the deal's agreed to buy it, then there should be no fuss. We can get straight into the redevelopment. But they need to be engaging with the community. They need to be telling folk what's happening and expected timescales. Because like anything, things can be delayed. We know that, but folk, it all goes back to communication. Folk need to be able to plan for these things. But like you say, there is plenty of scope to make it a thriving harbour again, and that's what we want to see.
Communication, honesty and transparency, like that has to be understood. You can't be putting out stuff there that is fluff and bluster, because people see through that, and there's already mistrust, I think, there. So I suppose that brings it back to you guys. Like, what's the next steps for the Save Ardrossan Harbour campaign, and how are you looking for people to get involved? And if you're looking to raise money, what are you going to do with all that? And then we can take it.
Yeah. Well, we have got a petition going, and that probably needs adjusted now with the new latest developments, because that was more about the redevelopment of the harbour, which is still the main aim. But we need to look at that whether we need to change the particular wording. We did apply to have a petition at Holyrood Parliament, the Scottish Parliament, because there's no numbers there. At Westminster, if you get 10,000 signatures, you get a government response. If you get 100,000, you get a debate. Holyrood don't have targets to hit. If it's accepted, they'll close it after a period of time, and then there would be a debate on our topic. So that was because we've done a paper petition, and folk kept asking when we're getting this online, because there's even the paper one, we've had folk sign that from Florida that have been in Ardrossan in the last few months. We've had folk sign that from all across Spain and different places. But folk were asking for the electronic one, and that was the delay, because we submitted a petition, actually get help from an MSP to write it, and let me try and get the name right, Scottish Government Public Participation in Petitions Committee rejected our petition because it wasn't of national importance. That was a blood pressure spike moment when that email came through, and an MSP had helped us write the language so that it should have passed the test. It didn't for whatever reason, and it's just, if you want to submit another one, go for it. So we've spent a bit of time playing about the language. That sack this, let's just get an online one. We've got a petition going in change.org. And in the last week or so, we've been talking to some folk for the RMT union, and they've fully backed the campaign. And Mick Lynch put out a letter to all the RMT members asking them to support the campaign and sign our petition, which is obviously great. And they've welcomed the news of the port going into public ownership. I think out of everybody saying they were welcoming it, we were the only group going, well, we're not so sure. And hopefully we'll be proved wrong. It's just another concern that's another delay. That's the biggest thing that we're concerned about, the delay. But we're going to continue the petition. I think we've got a meeting, not a public meeting. We've got a committee meeting coming up next week, and we're going to sit and come up with the next strategy. I think we'll need another. We need to get some meetings arranged with some MSPs, some government, Peel Ports, whoever will talk to us. We'll sit down and get a full understanding of what the next stage means for these negotiations, and then hopefully a public meeting. Some of the folk in the committee are wanting us to get ourselves up to Holyrood with our petitions and be seen up there. And maybe one of the MSPs will invite us to a meeting in Holyrood, and we can talk about it up there, and we can get our presence known in Edinburgh and make sure folk up there are knowing how important an issue this is. Certainly for the west of Scotland and wider, when you talk about the flexibility of the CalMac fleet. They want that sailing so they don't need to worry, they don't need to borrow boats, and they want to be able to keep the Isle of Arran. They'll probably use the Cale at Calais or somewhere else while they're waiting on the 4 new ferries coming for Turkey. So I don't understand for a minute how it's not a national issue and how our petition was ever rejected. But we're going to keep going, so we'll probably have some sort of event we'll look at, and there'll be, after our next meeting, we'll probably come up with a plan, and we'll start getting that out to folk and getting folk involved. We've had a couple of public meetings and they've all been well attended. So I think if we get some meetings with some of the key players to get their advice, and not so much advice, their take and what they think will happen, it'd be great to sit down with Kenneth Gibson, because he's talked about this as what he would want the port to be taken into public ownership, and he was quite happy on the day and warmly welcomed the announcement by Fiona Hislop. So it'd be interesting to get his take on it. I've had swapped emails with Jamie Green on the subject to try and get me. We want to meet with all the folk involved, all the West of Scotland MSPs that are particularly vocal on it. They're all vocal in support of it, but the 3, Kenneth, Katie and Jamie, are the most active on it. So we'll meet ideally with the 3 of them. We'll meet with, if we can get a meeting with Transport Scotland, First Minister, not the First Minister. Well, we'll meet with the First Minister if he wants to. If John wants to come down to Ardrossan, that's fine. We'll certainly meet with him. But with Transport Secretary and Transport Scotland, and try and get a full understanding, so that if we're having when we have another public meeting, we can tell the community, this is what we've learned, and this is where we think we're at, and this is where we want it to be. We want to keep pushing, and we're going to keep, as we say, we want to make noise. We want to keep making noise. We got some funding from North Ayrshire Council through the participatory budget scheme. You fill in your wee form and then it's a public vote. So we got £1,000 through that, which was great, and that's keeping us going in leaflets and hall bookings just now. So we're not having to rely on the goodwill of folk. So we'll look for other funding streams if and when that's required. All we ask is for folk to get involved by sharing their voice, help us raise the voice of the community in this important aspect, and they can do that by joining us on Facebook, coming to our campaigns of this, and obviously we've got the Ardrossan Saltcoats Herald this week have launched their campaign, and they're working closely with us and talking to us, which is great, and great to have them on board. As a local paper for the region, they're a great voice for the area, so we'll continue working with them and working with Neil and his team, and keep making a bit of a fuss.
No, absolutely. I would encourage folk to definitely, wherever they're listening or watching, go on to Facebook and join the Save Ardrossan Harbour campaign there and contribute to the discussion. And hopefully, maybe if you need any help getting on that task force, people will harass and, ask their local MSPs,
There has been a letter writing campaign since the event in Brodick. So I know folk have been writing to the MP for the region, the MSPs, Transport Secretary, so I know letters have been written, and I think we'll need to coordinate that a bit more and just get that focused and encourage as many folk as they can to write to their officials and push this along, like you say. That's hugely important, and that was something that was pivotal in the ATB campaign. The amount of letters that get submitted, and folk had asked for, should we get a template letter, folk can just sign their name, but I think it's much more effective for everyone. If me and you write a letter, it would be very different what we focus on. So then it's, instead of one problem, it's 2 cases we're raising. So if everyone writes their own individual letter highlighting it, for some folk it's they can't get to Arran regularly to visit their granny, they can't get the mainland to join the football team they've signed for. Everybody's got their own aspect to how this impacts them, and that's the hugely important thing. And it's the amount of folk we've spoken to, and what we're looking at is how to capture all these stories that we've heard and all the individual things, that how it impacts in people's everyday lives in very different ways. So if folk are writing a letter, just capture that, and it doesn't need to be big long letters. It can just be like the girl that spoke to Neil and his team at the Ardrossan Herald, that she was left in the terminal in the darkness. Other folk have said they've got great difficulty walking from down Troon, and there's now a bus from the Troon train station down to the boat, but it's still difficult if you're elderly, you're infirm. The gangplank up the boat to Troon is steep as. I think wheelchairs and prams need to go on the car deck, which wouldn't be a very great journey.
Aye, no, absolutely. Well, I wish you all the best with it anyway, Matt. I do appreciate you coming in today to speak to us, and I'm happy to follow up with anybody. See how this goes, and fingers crossed we can get the port purchased there and take it from there.
Absolutely. Thanks very much for inviting me on.
Right, no worries, mate. Good man. Thank you. Cheers.